So, hi everyone, welcome back to the Profitable Franchisees podcast. My name is Tracey Leak and I'm, of course, your host. This is the podcast where we bring powerful stories and strategies to help you to be a more profitable franchisee. I'm really excited because today we've got Katrina here from New Sky Consulting talking with us, and we're talking about how to create a team culture to thrive. And when we talk in franchising, a lot of people talk about the culture of the franchise as an entirety, like the nationwide franchise group. But what you have to also remember as a franchisee, what's the culture within your individual business? And that's kind of the level we're going to be talking at today. It's not about the culture the franchisor sets, it's about the culture you set within your own business with your team. So a little background about Katrina so you know who's talking to us today. Katrina's a leadership and HR coach who specializes at helping small and growing business owners, leaders, and managers to lead with confidence, clarity, and impact while building high performing, harmonious teams. And the bit I love the most in all of that is harmonious teams. Because wouldn't we all love that to have a team where it's just running like clockwork? So, first of all, Katrina, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Really am. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Hey, let's start with this one. It's kind of a big one that just gets thrown around. This word culture. It gets thrown all around, but what does it actually mean in your opinion when we put it to a small business owner? What is culture?
Yeah, I think the simplest way I can describe it is it's the way we do things around here. It's how we show up individually and as a group for ourselves, each other, our clients, our customers, and our organization. So it's very much embedded in our values, like what are our beliefs? What is it important to us? It's also around our behaviors. So that values reflected in behaviors, and it gets informed from your vision. It gets informed from your purpose, your reason for being, your reason why you exist in your business. And it's also very much informed by your policies, your procedures, and the practices, the way things are done. Yeah.
That's a really good point because I've never really thought about it. Oftentimes when we talk about culture and we think about it, we think of it about that feeling, but we don't actually put it towards our systems and processes as well. There's actually a, a process to culture. It's not just how people feel, correct?
Mm, correct. So to me, your culture as a leader is designed. You design your culture. Like you need to be so clear on what you want it to look like, which is very much often a reflection of you as leader, that you can design it. So having that clarity of how you want it to feel. So feeling is where it starts, and the feeling equals the behaviors, and the behaviors are then supported by systems so that you can replicate. So you've got clarity, and so your people are supported to live those beliefs, live those values, to make sure the culture becomes that embedded sense of being.
Mm.
Yeah.
So let's imagine, someone's listening, they go, okay, I've got to get onto this culture thing and start working on my culture in my business. And a lot of the franchisees we've had on the podcast have all mentioned about having a great culture within their business, which has led to more success. So if I'm
Mm,
starting out on this culture journey, where do we start? How do I work out where I am right now and what I
mhm.
need to do to improve it? Is there a process? Is there a thought pattern behind this?
So there's two things there that I'll touch on. One is, I said it earlier, it comes back to you. So being very clear and understanding as business owner who you are, your values and all those sorts of things, and how you want your business to look. And then the second thing is I talk about it on a matrix. I call it my optimal team matrix. And there's two key variables that go towards building a unified team that's successful based on a great culture. So if you think of the two different axes of a matrix, the one key variable is connection. So how connected am I to me? How connected am I to my team? And how connected is my team to each other? So you've got that connection. So is it a high connection or a low connection? And then on the other variable, you've got your systems, your framework, your structures, and how established is your structure? Do you have a really good structure in place that supports the good work of your people and what you're doing in your business? Or is it pretty absent? and ad hoc and maybe not documented, maybe just a feeling, not so much cemented in policies, procedures, systems, and structures. So understanding where you are at those two key variables. So do you want me to unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Tell us a bit
Yeah.
more about that.
Yeah. So if you found yourself as a business owner with your team, that you had a team that was really, really connected. So you felt like you had a team that got on really, really well. They understood each other, they supported each other, and you felt like you had a really humming, harmonious team. But you didn't have a lot of structure. So there was no HR practices and policies and procedures in place. People didn't really have a documented system that they could follow. If things came up, it was kind of just dealt with rather than following a clear system. You would be in what I call blissful ignorance. So you've got this beautiful, blissful team. Everyone's having a great old time. Everything's really cool. And it is cool. It's so good until it's not. And I always say it isn't until, because there will be some point where things do start to fragment, especially if you grow. And if you have that great team, but you don't have the structures, you are what I call in a little bit of risky business when it comes to legal hot water. So you could be at risk of finding yourself in, say, Fair Work, discrimination, all sorts of different things when it comes to legislation that impacts you as an employer, because you don't have the systems in place to deal with things when it does start to maybe unravel, and it will at some point. So that's blissful ignorance. High connection, no structure. But then you might find yourself in what I call bare minimum. And that's where you have a team that's probably working in silos. You have compliance is like tick, 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 tick. We are so good. We have all the policies and procedures in place. Our people are really following that, but they're not connected. So their connection to each other, their connection to you as leader in the business, like what does the business stand for? How meaningful is the work and the people that they're with? They're not leveraging off of each other because they don't really understand each other. They don't have that sense of camaraderie, harmony, unity. Then you've got people who are just going to do the bare minimum. They're going to follow the rules because the rules are highly enforced, with the absence of connection to the business, the people, and each other. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you could be one of those two. And when you're in bare minimum, you're at risk of people leaving because the work's not meaningful. There's no sense of fulfillment there, and they're not creating those bonds or connections with each other either. So the relationships happening within the group and the team aren't as present, and they may not find the work meaningful.
What happens if you don't have either of those things? Like you've got no policies
Yeah.
and no connection, which would be
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
worst place, I'm assuming, to be.
That is the pits. That is the worst. This is what I call toxic chaos. So this is where no one wants to be in toxic chaos, do we? So often we hear people talking about my workplace is so toxic. And when you think of that, you think of people there's high conflict, there's a lack of support for each other, there's a degree of, people will say that I feel like I'm being bullied, I feel like I'm being isolated, people aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, there's duplication, there's people crossing over, there's no support for each other, and it's just ugly and horrible, and it's chaotic because they don't even have the systems in place to know how to deal with those issues, those peopling issues that may arise that go towards contributing to a toxic environment. So low performance or poor conduct, they're not meeting the conduct that you expect in your business. So there's no systems in place to deal with that, and it's just chaotic. And for a business owner, that's like drowning because you don't quite know where to start. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the opposite of that, of course, Tracey, is the unified success, where you have a highly connected team who do get on well, understand each other, are leveraging off each other's strengths, and you've got a structure in place that supports the good work. So things get addressed, things get followed, and you have had that clarity for people. The expectations are clear. The how we do things when things crop up is there for you as business owner and for your people. Decision making is much clearer because it's in the systems as well as the connection. Yeah, that's where you want to be. Yeah.
So imagine we're sitting in that. I love that toxic chaos. I love that. I also love
Ooh.
the blissful ignorance as well.
Yeah.
If we're sitting there, how do we move from that bottom left-hand quadrant up to that top right-hand quadrant? Is there a process? Like, do we do
Mm.
processes and systems first, or is it about connection, or do you need to be working on both? Like, how do we go from one of those other three quadrants that are not ideal and get into that unified success quadrant? Is there steps or things that we can do to make that happen?
Yes. So when I work with my clients, I have like a blueprint that I follow, and it's generally the same 7 steps, but the degree of focus that you give to each may differ. And the reason I say that is because it all starts with clarifying your goals. So wherever you are in that matrix, you really need to understand, where am I now? And then where do I want to be? And what's the gap? So getting very, very clear on where you want it to be. It all starts there. The next step that I take them through is to really crystallize their foundations. And that is about the values, coming back to the foundational stuff, the values. What are you building this on? What's most important to you as leader that you want reflected in your business with your team and for your people as a team as well? When you're clear on values, everything else is built on that. So the way they show up and conduct themselves with each other, with your clients, and in your policies and procedures, it all needs to be reflected. So having that's really important, no matter where you are on the matrix, knowing that's going to be really important. And then I take them through connection. So connect your team, knowing the people in your team, understanding their strengths, understanding their natural talents and abilities, knowing how they perform best, their zone of genius, what lights them up, how they like to be rewarded and recognized, and how do they fit in with each other, so helping them understand each other as well. And then I move through to the HR and the systems and structure side of things, which is, again, you check, where are we now? We do a bit of an audit, check where you are right now. Create a plan. So, okay, what's most important to us? Where are we struggling the most with those things? Do the framework, set up the policies and procedures, and then cultivate the culture. So if you were in blissful ignorance, you'd still do the first part, which is about the foundations and the connection. But you may need to spend more time on the other side, the second part, which is the structures. But if you've got the people understanding, this is what we're doing, this is why, this is what's most important to us, and collaborate with them around where do we need to start with our systems, what's most important to us, you're going to get ownership from them and more support from them to move forward in establishing those things. And same with bare minimum. If they weren't very well connected, you'd probably spend more time on the connection piece and less on the compliance, or you'd be able to quickly go, what's working for us with our compliance and structures, what's not, what do we need to alter.
And it's a good point. Like, once you identify where you are on that matrix, you know what you need to work on. If you're in that blissful ignorance, well, you've got the connection. Let's just make sure we've got the processes and policies behind. And, it's kind of, my analogy would be like we're going on a trip through Europe and we're having a great time, but none of us know where we're staying tonight. We don't know where we're going to sleep tonight or where we're going tomorrow, or if we even got enough fuel to get there. And it'd be pretty
Yes.
easy. Like, we have to think about this in the world of HR in this day and age. You've got to be really careful, because you can have a team that's really connected and having lots of fun, but it doesn't take long for people to maybe get too comfortable with each other, start making inappropriate jokes or inappropriate comments, and all of a sudden you've now offended someone and you haven't got the policies and procedures behind to back you up. You can be in a world of hurt, right? That takes
A
you to.
world of pain. It takes you to, if you don't know how to quickly address some of those key things you've talked about, so inappropriate conduct, and you don't have systems in place as business owner to know how to deal with that, and your people don't know, hey, this is how we deal with stuff like that. So you can expect that if you're going to be doing this, we're going to deal with it, and this is how. And if you don't do that in accordance with legislation, so let's talk fair work and dismissal, if you're not doing that appropriately, then you can find yourself in a lot of trouble. And sadly, it doesn't often take much for things to go from wonderful, we're really good, we're such a family team, to not so great. Because people come to work as whole people,
Mm.
and you don't know what's going on in their life. So someone can have outside influences that may be impacting them, that may influence their behaviour at work. So you've got to have systems in place to help manage those things that you don't understand or aren't aware of. You can have a new person come along who perhaps isn't a great values fit for your business, and that one person can completely unravel a whole team, sadly. And if you don't have that structure in place to catch it and to adjust it and to help people move towards the kind of conduct you want, then yes, lots of legal risk
You said a word in
and
there, and
pain and heartache.
yeah, the pain and heartache. We all want to avoid that. You said a word in there, and it was funny because I actually saw this on TikTok yesterday, and I went, "Oh man, this is great!" Because I'm talking to Katrina tomorrow. Um, it was it was an American. They were talking about business owners who start to talk about their team as we're a family, and they said that's actually a mistake because one, people can have very different definitions of what a family actually is, but a family usually doesn't have rules to it. There's not, written rules or processes. And she said, as a team, you should actually be thinking of yourself as a professional sporting team, like we're a team, and that's how we work together to get the most. And you should be very careful saying, oh, we're just a big family here, because that doesn't actually work. What's your thoughts on that? I've just chucked it at you, but
Yeah,
what's your thoughts
no,
on
no,
this
it's a
whole
great
family
one.
thing? I hear people in
Yeah,
franchising specifically say
we're
this all the
such a
time.
family.
We're a family, and I'm like, oh, it just grits me, but I don't know why. Maybe you can explain
Yeah.
why it grits me.
No, I get it. And I have business owners that I work with who do that, and family is a really big value that they have. I totally see where the person you're talking about came from, because people do have their own very personal experience with family. And what that means to them. And some people actively choose not to have relationships with their family because it's not supportive, productive for them. So you do have to be really careful. So I think if you're going to if a value of yours is creating a family environment, you need to be really, really clear about what does that mean for us, and almost define it together as a team, so that you're not inheriting their definition of what that is. They're not inheriting yours. You're building it together, so you can create that it's a sense of, isn't it? It's a sense of belonging. It's a sense of unity. Those sorts of things. For most people, that's what they think of family. Not everybody, but if that's important, and having that, unpack it, define it, and build it together is probably what I would say. Yeah, yeah.
I love
Because so
that.
many of the
Define
small
it.
businesses do talk about, we're just like one big happy family. And let's be real, the happy families have conflict all the time. And they may not have written policies and procedures, but they have norms, they have unspoken expectations, unspoken rules, and sometimes they have written rules. We all function in our families in a very different way. So, family is important to you, and you want to call your team that, build it together, and create the definition. Yeah.
And I love that about defining things, because I mean that doesn't just come. I see family as a shortcut word for all those things you said about. Family for me might mean, supportive. We've always got each other's back. Whereas for you, it might mean loyalty. For someone else, it might mean connected. And actually defining it, instead of trying to shortcut your words, actually specify what they are. Break it down so everybody's 100% clear. So
Mm,
if we're
mm,
trying to define our values, I have this
mhm.
saying, and I hate it when companies say, oh, yeah, we did our values, and they're like 4 posters on the wall, and you
Yeah.
walk in, and one of them is like, the one I see a lot is abundance. And then you start talking to them, and you go, you're not abundant at all. but this is the
No,
value that's on the wall, but you're not actually even following it. What's a
correct.
good way for a business owner to actually create the values they want for their business, whether they've currently got them or that's what they're trying to develop? How
Yeah.
do they sit down and work out what those values are, and how do they then communicate that to their team?
Yeah, yes. And it's so important. So to me, values are really important, but they mean nothing if they're just words on a wall. They have to actually translate to behaviors. You actually have to see it lived. How do we live it? How do we demonstrate it? And how do we hold ourselves accountable to it? So defining your team values, your business values with your people is really important. And it's also important in terms of them that, like you said, we all have different definitions for different words, but how do we take that definition and align our values with it? So it's the alignment we're looking for, not a direct tick flick. I say honesty, you say honesty. My word for honesty might be a bit different, but it's alignment. So how do we do that? So I do workshops with my clients around exactly that, because it's a process. It starts again with the business owner. You as business owner or owners, you need to be clear on the values. You need to be able to define them for yourself first, and what they mean and the kind of behaviors that you're looking for in that. And then you need to bring your people along the journey with it. And that again is, you can start with, what do you think they are? And this is ours, and then look at the behavior and the meaning. So it's a process, a conversation, and an alignment of the two. Even aligning your people's personal values with the business values. Can they see themselves in your business values?
Mm. And I'm assuming that's not something you do once and it's set and left. Like,
No.
it's something you should come back and revisit every now and then and make sure, one, you're actually living those values. I love that. I actually wrote that down of how do we live our values. But we want to make sure we're doing it. But also, businesses change, people change, our values can change. Yes?
Yes. So our values, to me, we have core and aspirational values. So quite often our core values are very inherent. They rarely really change that much, but we do have aspirational values. So values that as we grow and develop, and as a business that we aspire to, or we want to grow into this, they're all important to us, but where's our focus going and what do we want to grow into? So yes, they can move and adjust. The core ones generally don't change too much. Now I've forgotten your original question.
That was my original question. I think you got it right on the nail on the head.
But
I'm
and you
asking
do
lots of
need to
questions.
revisit
Sorry,
them.
I'm getting excited and I'm
No,
giving
that's
you lots.
okay.
But
But you do need to revisit them. That was the other part of your comment. Is I agree. You need to revisit them, because you're, like I said at the beginning, you design your culture, and it is not a set and forget. You need to make sure you're vigilant. And when you've created a culture that you're proud of, that you love, that your people feel a great sense of belonging, value, contribution, fulfillment, and meaning, you want to be vigilant in protecting that. And you protect that by making sure it's front of mind. And you can do that in many different ways with your team. You can run an annual, reflection on it. You can talk about your core values in team meetings or huddles, just talking about values and what they mean to you, or recognize someone who's lived them that you want to call out and recognize, and say, hey, this person did this. They demonstrated this value so well because they did this. So there's many different ways you can keep it front and center, but you definitely want to make sure it's part of your ritual and routine to keep them front and center and
I have
renewed.
a franchisor who does that. I know we're talking about franchisee level, but I have a franchisor who has, they do a monthly call with all their franchisees, and they start off the session of, they have their core values and they say, hey, who's got an example of one of our core values in action this last month? And the
Correct. Yeah.
franchisees will share one of the core values and how they experienced it, or what they saw, or how they used it
Yeah.
in the last month. And it's
Yeah.
such a simple way to start a meeting.
So simple, but so effective, because it's even more effective when you get people to call out someone they've seen in the team live them. So it's that recognition as well as that, because that other person might have not have even realized they were consciously doing it, but it raises the consciousness and it recognizes, and it, it's just a good camaraderie recognition as well. So it's very effective, simple and effective.
Oh no,
Yeah.
I so love that. I'm going to totally R&D. R&D means rip off and deliver. I'm going to so an R&D that for a lot of my
Oh, I
clients.
love that.
I love that you actually pick it out in someone else, because that brings in the recognition aspect. It brings in, that we're actually conscious of seeing each other. And I have this analogy in coaching that you should catch people doing things right rather than just always catching them doing things wrong. And that's it costs you absolutely nothing to start off a team meeting by saying, hey, who's caught someone using one of our values in a positive way? Like,
Yeah.
what a great
Yeah.
way to lock in
Yeah.
that value set and to keep that.
Yeah.
That's, to me, that's something you can do to develop culture.
Yeah, and it keeps it front of mind. And I mean, who doesn't like to get some form of recognition from your fellow people,
Mm.
some people who've gone, you may not even know that you've made a difference to their day until the day that they say, I'd like to recognize Tracey for living the value of collaboration. She invited my opinion on blah, 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 or my input on blah, blah, blah project. And together we worked out a solution. And I was really grateful for her contribution. Little things like that. It's just, who doesn't want that level of recognition from their
Mm.
fellow team members? Yeah.
So when we look at those key ingredients you talked about, understanding your goals and the HR aspect and all of those things, what one do you see that people commonly get wrong? Like, you go, man, this is one that's easy to fix or something you should work on, but it's ignored or they just don't do it very well. What's the key
Yeah.
one that people get wrong?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think you're talking about my key ingredients to a great culture, and they're the ones I've got a strong foundation. So that's that core vision. And that there's trusted leadership, which is around how do you build trust within your team? How do you inspire and role model and create an environment where people feel safe to contribute, make mistakes, all those sorts of things. Then you've got a dynamic team, so the strengths of your people. And then you've got making sure you've got a thriving culture, not that set and forget. You're doing things to build your culture over time, the rituals and routines. And then you've also got the clear system, so the structures. The ones I see business owners really struggle with is that trusted leadership.
Mm.
It's vulnerability. So when you're a leader of your own business, it's almost like it's your baby. And I've been there myself, I've created something amazing and I've wanted to be the perfect leader and I'm building a great team and I want to make sure that everything goes perfectly and runs perfectly. But as I grow, I can't do it all myself. But gee, it's hard to let go. Relinquishing control is one of the biggest struggles. And it's one of our greatest vulnerabilities is to hand over the trust to other people in things that maybe we feel like we should hold on to control of. So I think trusted leadership is one of the things that for business owners, coming back to identifying your own strengths, leaning into your strengths and identifying the strengths of your people so that you can relinquish control. You can demonstrate trust. You can give trust in order to receive it back. And vulnerability is a big part of that. Not having all the answers, not having to always be right, not having to be the one to solve all the problems. That was one I really struggled with as a business owner very early on. Is I kind of loved being the leader at that time that everyone came to solve all their problems. I was my biggest bottleneck.
Mm.
And until I had to go on maternity leave, I didn't realize how big a bottleneck I was because I had to, I had people needed to operate and solve problems without me for a little while. So relinquishing control, establishing the systems and creating a level of trust is probably one of the biggest mistakes and the easiest that they can do. It just takes time.
So if you're listening right now and your culture's not great, maybe you're actually the problem, not your team, is what we're actually saying. Okay. And as you said, that's the best thing is because you're in control of this. You can change it. And, I see this a lot with franchisees, that trusted leadership point is they're great when it's a single unit. They just have their
Oh,
one. But when they go into multi-unit, now we're not 100% present all hours of the day. All of a sudden, you thought you were trusting, but you actually weren't.
no, you're more in command and control than you are in trust and inspire.
Did everyone hear
Yeah,
that? Command and control versus trust and inspire. That's a little takeaway. Write that one down, guys, because I will in a moment as well. Um, that's
yeah,
such a good
yeah.
point.
Especially if you've got two different, you're talking about two different site locations.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, because then you can't be Johnny on the spot and there every day for every hour of the day. So the need to trust your people and have the systems in place to support them to do the work becomes even more important, because as you grow in, and that's the joy of being a franchisee, is you do get that replicable system.
Hmm.
But your people systems and your culture, you can't outsource that. You need to create that. So you need to create the systems in place that support your culture and your people and the trust you have with them and understanding them and leveraging their strengths. Yeah,
The analogy I
yeah.
always use is context versus content. Like if you've got a fruit bowl, that's the context. That's firm. We can't change the size of it. But then the content is the fruit. So, when you're
Mm-hmm.
putting in your team, you want your culture to be that strong fruit bowl. And then it doesn't matter what team you put in there. It doesn't matter if it's apples or oranges or whoever, they all fit within that bowl. And yes, your team, sometimes
Yeah.
you can consider them as a bit fruit loopy, you know. We all have had
Yeah.
those too.
Yeah. Oh, I do love that analogy. That's really nice. Yeah, I like it. And it's even almost like saying you've got, and people come into the fruit bowl, but you've attracted the right fruit. Like you've got the perfect fruit salad because you've attracted the right fruit, because you're so clear on your values and you've attracted people to you because of that as well. The
Mm.
perfect fruit salad. Love that.
We love it. So we're going to finish up in a minute, but I wanted to talk to you about like once your culture's, humming along and everything's great, you've got all your policies and procedures in place, you've built that culture, you've built yourself as a leader. How important is it when you bring in a new team member to actually induct them? Like how do we like a lot of franchisees will induct them to what they need to do. Like, we've got to wash our hands here and this is how we do things. But what's the process for inducting someone into the culture of a business?
Mm, mm. And I think that you exactly, induction, your onboarding procedures and practices with your people are really, really important. Your relationship with your new recruits happened before they even started with you. It happened in the job advertising phase. It happened when they checked you out online, all that sort of stuff. So it happened earlier than that. So your onboarding is a continuation of that relationship. So in your induction, don't just skip over, don't just include the policies and procedures. Talk about the values. Even in your recruitment side of things, when you're asking and interviewing people, bring out the aspects of values. Find out, ask questions that open up what's most important to them and their values so you can see that alignment as well. And then in the induction, talk about the values, talk about the who. Who are we? What do we stand for? What's important to us? What we do, and then the why. Why do we do it? Why are we doing this business? What's our reason for being? And share that. And then for us, it's a two-way conversation. And what do you hope to achieve? And what's your vision for yourself in our business with our bigger vision, our bigger why? And then always the how, which is your practices, policies, procedures. Talk about your code of conduct. These are the behaviours that we hold most important. Get them to talk to other people, buddy them up if you can with people who you know are really great role models and are really good at taking people under their wing and supporting them through the early stages of their time with you and your business. So they help them see the spoken, unspoken norms and get a good understanding of who's who in the zoo and the practices and how we do things around here. Yeah, it's super important.
Man, we could talk for ages about this. We might have to
We
get
could.
Katrina to come back and talk about this because I think this is such a key component because when I talk to top performing franchisees, the word culture is always mentioned. And if you're new to business or, you're in your franchise group and you just haven't quite picked that up, you don't understand we throw around a lot of words of culture and leadership and things, but, Katrina's given us some really practical things that you can do to actually start to make your way to that unified success, because we certainly don't want to be in toxic chaos. Stay away from that, guys. um, you know, look at your processes. Not every franchise group provides HR expertise to actually have all your policies and procedures in place. So make sure you reach out to someone like Katrina, or reach out to Katrina directly, because she can help you on the HR side of things as well, to actually make sure you've got that in place. So if you're interested, I'm going to pop all of Katrina's details into the show notes, as I always do for all of our guests. Katrina's from New Sky Consulting. If you want some help around your HR, or if you want an in-team workshop, and also she can also do keynote speaking. So if your franchisor is looking for a speaker at the next conference and you've loved what Katrina's had to say, then maybe that's something that you could do as a team as well as at a franchise level. But thank you so much for joining us, Katrina. We've really enjoyed it. I took notes through this. So oftentimes if I'm taking notes, it means I want to get it down now so I don't forget. So there was some real valuable key little sayings in there and things to help people. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's been a joy, absolute joy. Thank you. I love it when people have some gold nuggets that they can take away. Yeah, thank you. Joy.
Pleasure. So everyone, remember, make sure you come back next week to listen to our next episode of the Profitable Franchisees podcast. Remember as well, we also have the newsletter that accompanies the podcast, so the Franchisee Profit Pulse. If you're not yet signed up to that, just go over to my website at traceyleak.com and you can gain access to that. 100% free, comes to your inbox every fortnight. And also, I haven't talked about this in ages, but don't forget as well, you can grab a free e-copy of my best-selling book, which is 101 Tips for Franchisees. You can get that at my website, or go to 101tipsforfranchisees.com. And 101 is in numerals, okay? So 101. But again, thanks, Katrina. As I said, I'll put all of Katrina's details in the show notes so you can reach out. And I look forward to seeing you all guys next week on the next episode of the Profitable Franchisees podcast. Thanks, guys. Bye.